in order for the human brain to act like a transmitter and receiver. Naturally, the material world is indisputably materially extant and real, yet, for the human being's consciousness, it somehow, in spite of that, presents its own created illusion. Therefore, if a human being views a certain color or hears a certain tone, and so forth, which, in compliance with his senses, he perceives, or thinks of, as something especially definite for him, then the same color and the same tone, and so forth, can be perceived and identified completely differently by another human being or creature. Bluntly put, that which harmoniously affects one, exerts a repulsive effect on the other. Seen in its entirety, that also goes for every single atom and all forms which exist as subatomic forms up to even far below the highest level of atoms. Actually the atom is, namely, not the smallest unit of solid material, although it consists of 99.9999% vacuum and, according to physics, the atomic nucleus itself is nothing more than pure nothing. Were it possible to compress all of our world's atomic nuclei into solid material without vacuum, then the Earth would be no bigger than a marble about the size of a sparrow's egg. As physics meanwhile proves, the state of the atom changes constantly since it exhibits no stable substance, because the electrons and protons are gripped by constant change. Consequently, they are, at one point, particles, and then they become waves again. But that does not correlate to any solid material, rather only to information, energies and power. That is also the reason that, for example, quanta can be at various places simultaneously, even if that appears to be impossible. And the fact is, the invisible, basic elements of the universe and all life, know of the existence of all the others, and they exchange information with each other on the other side of the boundaries of space and time. See, Existing Life in the Universe, published in 1978, from page 189, each life knows about the life of the next one, Billy Age of Aquarius Publishing Company, FIGU. In this sense, the following is written in Existing Life in the Universe. The human being knows about the existence of the life of the neighbor. He knows about the life of his fellow human and of the entire mass of humanity. Therefore, however, he also knows about the life of all fauna and flora and therefore about the life of creation of the universal consciousness itself. However, he also knows about the life of the planets and the stars, the galaxies, and of the entire universe as well as about the life of the feinstofflich and that which is material. This is even the case when the conceptual capabilities of various human beings are very divergent and the understanding of all things is extremely different. Nevertheless, however, human beings are in accord in acknowledging the existence of life and of all things generally. Now, as the human being knows, however, about the existence of all life and all things, so is it also the case with any other life form and therefore also with any cell of an existing life form. This, however, is not the end of the material's knowledge about the other material, because the very knowledge about the existence and life of the other material, and of all life generally, is also available in each of the smallest electrons and neutrons, in every molecule and in every atom, and therefore in every quark regardless of whether it is material or already feinstofflich and exists very far below the level of the quark. As creation itself as the universe and universal consciousness knows about the existence of the life of all things, life forms, elements, atoms and molecules and other forms of life in material and feinstofflich form, and is conscious of the connectivity of everything, so does this knowledge exists in everything, in every life form, in every element, in every insect, virus and bacillus, in every atom and in every molecule and in everything which is much smaller yet, in the material as well as in the feinstofflich realm, and so on and so forth. The human being's thoughts and feelings also consist of energy, and powers contained in it, which radiate, by means of electromagnetic vibrations as a product of the consciousness. The vibrational energies and their powers consist of tiny feinstoffsinnlich, or fluidal, units of information, which individually and collectively constitute a unit, and which, like the electrical current through wires, flow in an invisible form through the brain and through the body to finally leave these and to reach the environment and the ether, from where they are picked up by sensitive human beings, that is to say, by human beings who have at their disposal the ability of feinstoffsinnlich perception. Now, when a human being dies, then, during his death throes, he loses the connection to the rational intellect, whereby that which pertains to the feinstoffsinnlich gains power and produces electromagnetic energetic loads which result from feinstoffsinnlich thoughts and feelings, which radiate explosively, and can be perceived by other human beings even at a great distance. As a rule, they are human beings who have a close mental connection to the dying person. The persons concerned receive the dying human being's units of information through fluidal, or feinstoffsinnlich, electromagnetic vibrations, which are heavily laden with feinstofflich energy and which contain the information in themselves as power. Naturally, the wave frequencies of the feinstoffsinnlich vibrations thereby play a decisive role, whereby not every human being can therefore receive the same wave frequencies, and not everyone can tune his feinstoff sense to the same degree to near or very distant impulses and information which are directed at him. Therefore, with the mental connection, the wave frequencies must have a certain similarity, so that messages from dying ones, or from other fellow human beings, can be received, be they sounds, thoughts and feelings or visionary images, and so forth. Were that not the case, then, worldwide, all human beings would simultaneously, and in unison, pick up the same impulses and data, in infinite number, from all of humanity's feinstoffsinnlich radiations. But that would not only lead to chaos, rather the entire humanity would become insane and loony, because the entire torrent of all the impulses and information could not be coped with. A similar situation would exist if the whole of humanity became comprehensively capable of reading thoughts, or even capable of pure telepathy, and no differentiated wave frequencies existed through which the thoughts could be read with a particular human being, or through which telepathic communication could be maintained with a particular human being. Therefore, the simple reading of thoughts does not represent a simple matter, any more than does actual telepathy. And indeed this is regardless of whether the latter is based on simple primary telepathy, which only reaches 900,30 kilometers, or whether it deals with higher, secondary, or even with spiritual telepathy through which boundless expanses can be bridged. Taken as a whole, all these forms often present a very great challenge for the human being who masters them, and indeed for the brain and the consciousness as well as for the entire body. For human beings who, through extreme experiences and other events, acquire these capabilities of even just simple thought reading, of clairaudience or clairvoyance, and of seeing visions, which is also called clairvoyance, there is often great danger to their intellect, and the health of their consciousness. But that is based on the fact that arising from it are, very often, all kinds and shades of fearful states which no longer can be overcome, and, consequently, lead to damage of the psyche as well as to the consciousness, even extending to schizophrenia. And very many who gain feinstoffsinnlich capabilities as a result of incisive events are affected by delusional imaginings, and indeed because such human beings are overtaxed by the suddenly emerging feinstoffsinnlich skills and cannot handle it, with the opposite case being when the capabilities are consciously learnt, which can be the most simply brought about with persistent meditative practice. Through incisive events, emerging feinstoffsinnlich talents come about unintentionally, and therefore often bring great tragedy with them, because the foreign thoughts and feelings, as well as the other human beings' strange spiritual fine sensitive feelings which have nothing to do with feelings, as is, unfortunately, generally erroneously assumed, bring, as a rule, for those affected, who can perceive everything in a feinstoffsinnlich way, grave burdening to the consciousness as well as to the psyche and body, to which they are not equal, and through which their life becomes hell in the truest sense of the saying, or is even destroyed. Not only can a faculty of perception pertaining to feinstoffsinnlichkeit emerge in regard to incisive events, it is not infrequent, as a result of incisive events such as serious accidents, serious illness or experiences of shock, and so forth, that instead of the emergence of feinstoffsinnlichkeit forms, schizophrenic forms emerge which are often underpinned by religious sectarian states. If such a state emerges, then the resulting delusional imaginings are, as a rule, aligned in such a way that those affected hear imaginary voices, have delusional visions and become noticeably delusional and succumb to the delusional belief in receiving alleged messages from God, Jesus, angels, saints, extraterrestrials, spirits, the dead or demons. The inexpert person's life or sanity can be endangered by feinstoffsinnlichkeit, for which reason care is also called for with its deliberate study, and nothing, with which the consciousness, the intellect and rationality cannot cope may be forced. And actually, if it is incorrectly worked on and implemented, or as a result of an incisive event, the whole thing can also lead to the human being succeeding as a result of the skill he has worked to get in becoming an especially pronounced genius in some area or other and becoming a specialist idiot. Such human beings are then, as a rule, no longer capable of living in everyday life, because they can no longer adapt themselves to the social structure and they become infinitely lost in it. As a result of the talent which has an extreme effect on them, they become overtaxed by everyday life and are no longer able to master it. Through commensurate meditation practice, one can also deliberately learn the capacity for the highest empathy, or the feinstoffsinnlich capability of spiritual fine sensitive feeling and empathy, in regard to the attitude and the world of feelings, as well as the spiritual fine sensitive feelings of other human beings. It is all only a question of the development of the feinstoffsinnlichkeit, and its application and utilization. With empathy, neurons which are interlinked over the entire brain and which neurologists also call mirror neurons play a very important role, because they are the decisive factors. The feinstoffsinnlich vibrations, as well as their energies and powers, which radiate out from the human brain, influence the brains of other human beings, whereby that can result over a distance of thousands of kilometers. With pure telepathy, that can be up to 900,30 kilometers, as was already explained. However, this influence does not only result when thoughts and feelings as, for example, with dying, with illness, misfortune or terrible events, and so forth are strongly radiated toward a particular person, rather a constant radiation onto the entire humanity takes place, from which, under certain circumstances, those who are sensitive enough, and can receive the right wave frequencies, can profit. In terms of profiting, it can be that, for example, a human being invents something or says or writes something particular, and so forth, which is then picked up by another human being somewhere in the world in a feinstoffsinnlich way, which is, however, also possible through the collective subconscious, after which this other human being then invents the same thing or says or writes the same thing, and so forth. The basis for the entire thing coming about in this sense is synchronization, for which reason, in this regard, one speaks of a meaningful harmonization between inkling and experience, which is also called a synchronistic occurrence. In fact, however, still many other possibilities and inclinations slumber in the human being, which he can make useful if he only consciously and meditatively makes the effort in regard to it. The human being consciously or unconsciously evokes some of these options while others, however, lie fallow and are not used. With one human being, these possibilities and inclinations emerge very strongly, while with another, they are repressed or are simply not perceptible to him. That also goes for the possibility and propensity for being receptive to the feinstoffsinnlich. Only when that which pertains to material sensitivity is switched off and the particular areas of the brain which are responsible for the material perceptions are thereby simply deactivated for a certain period of time can the feinstoffsinnlich realms be grasped in order to consciously use them. However, it must also thereby be clear that specific parts of the brain store all material and feinstoffsinnlich sensory impressions, while, in regard to the spellum small brain, which, among other things, also stints with his senses, he perceives, or thinks of, as something especially definite for him, then the same color and the same tone, and so forth, can be perceived and identified completely differently by another human being or creature. Bluntly put, that which harmoniously affects one, exerts a repulsive effect on the other. Seen in its entirety, that also goes for everything in order for the human brain to act like a transmitter and receiver. Naturally, the material world is indisputably materially extant and real, yet, for the human being's consciousness, it somehow, in spite of that, presents its own created illusion. Therefore, if a human being views a certain color or hears a certain tone, and so forth, which, in compliance they become waves again. But that does not correlate to any solid material, rather only to information, energies and power. That is also the reason that, for example, quanta can be at various places simultaneously, even if that appears to be impossible. And the fact is, the invisible, basic elements of the universe and all life, know of the existence of all the every single atom and all forms which exist as subatomic forms up to even far below the highest level of atoms. Actually the atom is, namely, not the smallest unit of solid material, although it consists of 99.9999% vacuum and, according to physics, the atomic nucleus itself is nothing more than pure nothing. Were it possible to compress all of our world's atomic nuclei into solid material without vacuum, then the Earth would be no bigger than a marble about the size of a sparrow's egg. As physics meanwhile proves, the state of the atom changes constantly since it exhibits no stable substance, because the electrons and protons are gripped by constant change. Consequently, they are, at one point, particles,